That's something that hangs over the whole documentary and your work in general, which is the fact that a company that operates on an incentive structure that as you often say is selling our attention as the product because we nominally use these social media platforms for free. They actually don't have the incentive structure that makes it possible to reform themselves. And the analogy that really struck me, kept coming up while I was watching the documentary was just the analogy of food or candy companies. And I remember my mother growing up, she grew up in a very poor background in the Bronx. And she ended up escaping poverty and working at a marketing company at M&M Mars and was very high up. And one day she walked into the boardroom and they were speaking about where the metrics on the candy, on the Mars bars or whatever they were selling in the 80s. And they said that they were very happy because they were, quote, over-indexing on kids from her neighborhood in the Bronx. And that was a point of celebration. And that's one way to frame it. Another way to frame it is we're selling a lot of candy to poor kids that aren't eating breakfast and aren't aware of the long-term ramifications of too much sugar consumption. And, it's akin to asking a company like that, which is filled with normal people, right? Not evil masterminds, hell-bent on giving the world diabetes. But it's akin to asking them to regulate themselves and to sort of voluntarily scale back this insane drug, called sugar. And so that analogy of sort of food and candy, it kept recurring to me while watching the social dilemma. Is that a parallel you think makes sense?
Yeah, in fact, deeply, because one of the books that I read early on in this work, I think it was like 2012 or 13, was Salt, Sugar, Fat by Michael Moss at the New York Times, where he talks about the history of the food industry basically as a game theoretic contest between who can basically more cleverly combine just three simple ingredients, salt, sugar, and fat. And that the more interesting, almost like we do, what is it, drug discovery and AI, where you like have the AIs sort of calculate new combinations of things to sort of figure out what kind of drugs would solve various health issues in society. This is sort of the opposite, where you have food companies figuring out, hey, can we actually change what's called the mouthfeel of Cheetos? Can we have it dissolve faster? Can that get people to eat more? Hey, if we mechanically tenderize meat, do people chew more of it and buy more McDonald's because half the chewing has been done by a machine that's tenderizing the meat for them before they eat it? You end up with cereal where they combine different kind of elements together. And in general, it's this race to sort of reverse engineer the gustatory aspects of the human sort of nervous system to be maximally responsive. And much like in the attention economy, where there's a finite amount of attention that each of these companies in the digital sphere is competing for, can YouTube get the 30 minutes or can Netflix get the 30 minutes? In this case, in the food environment, there's a finite stomach share, and they used to talk about it as stomach share. And it's a win-lose game. So if they don't take it, the other guys will. And in fact, there was in this book, Salt, Sugar, Fat, documenting, I think it was either in the late 90s or might have happened twice. They had all the food companies gather in kind of a meeting like you're talking about, where they basically said, hey, can we regulate ourselves? Are we causing diabetes? They actually had food scientists talk about the trends of increasing diabetes, increasing obesity. And they said, do we have a role in this? And there was an attempt to try to create almost like a Geneva Convention for putting caps on the amount of salt, sugar, and fat in these products. And in fact, one of the CEOs, it becomes a classic multipolar trap, where if I don't do it, the other guys will. And so it's a race for who has the least ethics, basically who's most sociopathic, who's willing to just simply do the thing that works at getting the kids to, eat the Mars bars or whatever, or getting the teenage kids to, addicted to looking at photos of their friends. And in the case here, I think it was General Mills, Betsy Hall, I can't remember the name of the CEO, but she put limits of the amount of salt, sugar, and fat in her food company. And they did that at the same time that their competitors' products actually increased revenues. Theirs flatlined. And there was literally documented in the book a call with the Wall Street analysts who said, hey, why is your revenue flatlining? And the CEO explained that they put in these limits for salt, sugar, and fat. They actually kicked out the CEO, removed the caps on salt, sugar, and fat, and went back to business as usual. And this is very reflective of what we're seeing in technology, where Facebook adopted this phrase "time well spent," which is some of the 4 years ago version of some of our work, the Center for Humane Technology. And they supposedly changed their mission statement of Facebook to not maximize for time spent. But then ultimately, they ended up kind of repealing the limits on time spent that they were willing to sacrifice, and they're kind of going back to maximizing time on site, which is exactly what got us into this situation in the first place.